Oy de Bondi dik betulai Hasai fi mei khashmatim Ufol zu khoy sidolai Vetimu kol ashnonim Oy de Bondi dik betulai Hasai fi mei khashmatim Ufol zu khoy sidolai.
All right, thank you to everyone for coming. Thank you to those returning and those who are here for the first time. Very happy to have everyone. If anyone has any questions or comments during the discussion, please feel free to say something. Don't be shy, and if you are shy, you can always write something in the chat. Hopefully I will see it. But for those of you who are just joining us for the first time, we're learning Derech Hashem, which is the Ramchal's basically Sefer, his book on the fundamental beliefs of Judaism. So we've been learning it for over a year now, probably even close to 2 years. And we recently started section 4. Section 4 of Derech Hashem is where the Ramchal talks about all of the mitzvahs in the Torah. Not every single one, but the mitzvahs that we do more often. So we just spent the last few weeks talking about Torah study, the significance of Torah study, the spiritual implications of learning Torah, how great it is, the different requirements that are necessary for learning Torah, and what it does to the spiritual world when one learns. And today, we're going to start learning about Shema. So we are on section 4, chapter 4, number 1. And we use this edition. This is the Naaman edition of Derech Hashem. It's not only bilingual, but the footnotes are fantastic. He's Rabbi Naaman. I learned in front of him in yeshiva for many years, and he's a big Talmud Chacham. He translates for Art Scroll. He's written many Sfarim, and he has his footnotes here are fantastic. They make the Ramchal very many of his Kabbalistic esoteric ideas, he makes them very easy to understand, and his knowledge of all of the Ramchal's works is astounding. And he brings in the Ramchal's works and tries to piece together what the Ramchal is saying based on his other books. Okay, but let's get started. There are 2 services that we do every day before Hashem. And that is saying Shema and davening. Uzman Beis Hamikdash, during the time of the temple, Hatmidim v'hamusafim. We also had the Tamid and the Musaf offering. So every day, in the Beis Hamikdash, that we brought 2 sacrifices, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. Those are the Tmidim, the Tamid sacrifices. That's why we have Shachar and Mincha every day for Keneged that. And also on the holidays, we would bring a Musaf, an extra offering for Musaf. So that was an additional service that was done every day during the time of the temple. Va'ata nevar in Yonam. Now I'm going to explain the ideas behind them. Ha'achas hine hi kriya Shema. First is Shema. So what is Shema all about? We've been saying it since we were little kids, many times a day. And usually the more holy something is, the less serious we tend to take it, and the less thought we put into it. It's very interesting that when it comes to Sukkot, everyone wants to get the perfect esrog. When it comes to Rosh Hashanah, he's got to make sure he heard all the tekiyas from the shofar perfectly, and those mitzvahs only happen once a year. When we think that what we don't realize, we often forget, is that the reason we have Shema every day, the mitzvahs that we have every day are really more important. That means our neshama needs those mitzvahs every day. We only need shofar once a year. We only need to take a lulav and esrog once a year. But Shema, davening, tefillin, tzitzis, all that stuff, we need to do every day. Our neshama needs it every day, which means it's more important in a sense. And those more important things are often the things that we don't even know the deep meaning behind them. So that's what we're here for. We're going to learn about the deep meaning behind it. Ve'inyana. So what is the inyan of Shema? What is the meaning of Shema? So there's 2 things. Yichudo Yizbarach, v'Kabbalas al Malchus. So there's 2 ideas in Shema. One is recognizing the oneness of Hashem. Now we'll discuss what that means. That just doesn't mean a number, but there are other ramifications meaning the oneness of Hashem. And also the Kabbalas al Malchus Shemayim, which means accepting the yoke of heaven. That we're going to see that once we recognize that Hashem is one, and all of its ramifications stemming from that will be that we are Makabal al Malchus Shemayim, we accept the yoke of heaven upon us. Okay, let's go further. Ha'inyan, or on page, if you have this edition, page 505. Ve'inyan ki abari is baruch shemo himtzi beretzono nimtzaim shonim. God in his wisdom brought into being various creations. Elyonim v'tachtainim, upper creations and lower creations, ruchanim v'gashmiyim, spiritual creation and physical creations. We talked at the beginning of Derech Hashem how the Ramchal discussed how Hashem created, that we have physical creations such as animals, we have spiritual creations like malachim. There are other spiritual, how do you say spiritual? I don't want to say beings. Beings is the right word, but we'll say spiritual forces called kochos and spheros that exist. And we talked about the very complicated way that Hashem created both the physical and spiritual world and how it's all interconnected, and that man and woman, humankind, is the only being that has this combination of physical and spiritual together. The Sidram B'Sidarim Sharnim, he gave them various Sidarim, and he gave them the power to do certain actions, to go through various developments and cycles in many ways. In order, according to what his wisdom saw for each one. So Hashem created various creations with different jobs, based on Hashem created in specific ways based on how his wisdom decreed. Hashem is the source and the reason of being into existence of everything. And this is understood in two aspects. The bechina of reality and that of performance. We'll discuss right now what that is. Ramchal is going to discuss that. But bechinas hametzius, when it comes to reality, mashik far b'yanu b'chelik rishon. This is something we discussed in the first section. Mashik far b'yanu eich kol hametzios kulam tuliyim bo yizbarach v'nimshachim mirtzono. That everything that exists is dependent on Hashem and on Hashem's will. Mashe'eno kain metziuso, and this is not the case when it comes to Hashem's existence. Shehu metzius muchrach mitzan asmo ubilti nitla bezulaso. Hashem's existence is totally necessary, meaning Hashem has to exist. His existence is not dependent on everything else. Ach kol shar hametzius ein lahem metzius el mitzan mashu yizbarach shemo ratza behem mekayim b'rtzona. But everything else in the world, except for God, the existence of those things totally depends on Hashem's will. So the reason that we exist right now, that the whole world exists and all the spiritual creations exist, is because Hashem wants us to exist, wants them to exist. If Hashem for some reason would not want us to exist, we would blink out of creation. But Hashem himself, his existence is not dependent on anything else. His existence is murchach, it has to be. But bechinas ha'pa'ula, now when it comes to actions, Hashem created creations that have certain jobs and they have certain powers that they rule over. Even though Hashem created things that have power and control different things, the only power they have is what Hashem gave over to them. Hashem is the true master over everything. And that which every being does is only because Hashem gives the strength to the being to get it done. And he rules over them to add and detract based on his will every moment. So one could have thought that Hashem created the world, created beings, and gave them independent power to do whatever they want. But such is not the case. Rather, we only exist in the first place because Hashem wants us to exist and wills us to exist. Not only that, any power which we have is only because God gave us the ability and is constantly infusing us with that ability to rule over what we are able to rule over. Just skip the page? Nope. And from the depth of this topic, according to the processes which Hashem created, that we, excuse me, 1 second. Right, and all of the process of creation is to bring about the final tikkun of the world and the final rectification of the world. That when Rabbi Naaman writes at the bottom that the purpose of the world is that Hashem will bestow His goodness upon all of creations. That's a topic that we discussed at great length in the first section. There is a lot of evil that exists in the world. Whether it comes from the free will of man, from sinning, Or if it's because of punishments that were decreed upon man for their sins. And it appears that this is the opposite of the will of Hashem. This is something that the Ramchal discusses a lot in Das Tfunos, the beginning of Das Tfunos, that if you look around the world, you see a lot of evil. Right? This is a question that philosophers ask. How could evil exist? If there's a God, how could evil exist? So one could look at evil and theoretically say, there must be no God, there's evil in the world. How could a good God allow evil? Hashem only wants good. His whole essence is to give, is to do good. His name, God's name, is defiled when the wicked rule over the world. When evil is allowed to grow and cause destruction. Amnam, he continues, someone who knows the ways of Hashem, and they know, those who know the ways of Hashem know that the existence of evil is only a siba, is only a cause in his deep way. It's only, the existence of evil is only a point that exists to bring the world about to its perfection. That we discussed in the first chelik. Now, what the Ramchal talks about in Das Tfunos is that the whole world, there's two hanhagas that Hashem deals with the world. There are two ways that God interacts with the world. One way is hanhagas hamishpat, of schar va'onish, reward and punishment. This is something we're very familiar with, that God rewards those who do good, and He punishes those who do evil. But there's another way that God also simultaneously deals with the world called hanhagas hayichud. Hanhagas hayichud is that Hashem is constantly pushing the world to its final conclusion. That the world has a purpose. God didn't just put us here. God didn't just put us here that, we're born, we do as many mitzvahs as we can, and we die, and the world isn't going anywhere. It's just, it's like a test. It's like a video game. We see how many points we can accrue in our lifetime, and then we die, and if we did well, we get a good place in Olam Haba. That's not how it works. But rather, the world has a purpose, and is going to a final rectification. What is that rectification? That rectification is that the whole world should recognize that Hashem is one. So the way that comes about that the world recognizes that Hashem is one and that He is the only one who has any power is by Hashem showing that any other apparent power really has no power, has no force. There's really no other power besides Hashem. And the way that happens is by God allowing evil to exist. He gives the opportunity for people to choose between good and evil. And it allows Hashem to destroy the evil in the end of days. And when Hashem destroys the evil, it shows the oneness of Hashem and how the evil really never had an independent force. Now that evil exists, it looks like evil has an independent power. And that's a Chilul Hashem, a desecration of God's name. But in the end of days, when Hashem destroys the evil, that will show, wow, really the evil was nothing at all, and what appeared to be so powerful was really nothing, and Hashem is the only one in charge. And that's how it's going to lead to the rectification of Hashem's name. For instance, I don't know why Corona happened, I have no idea, but one could suspect that a lesson we learned from it is that we often think, human beings, that we're in control, we can control everything, and that's a level of evil, that's gaiva. So when Corona happened, we realized, wow, we don't have control over anything. The whole world shut down, the whole economy. People didn't know what was going on. It was an invisible thing that was totally destroyed the entire world, the whole way of doing things. So it could be that this is a step. Everything is a step for the world to recognize that there's one Hashem. We can only recognize that Hashem is the true power when we realize that we're really not in control. Okay, so let's just go maybe one more paragraph and then we'll finish up. Hashem is really guiding everything. And only the Eitzah, the counsel of Hashem, will prevail. To bring goodness and completeness to His creations. Like we mentioned over there, but to get to this completion, to get to this final point, and to get to the goal of humanity, we have to go through this process. Al piyasodos hachachma hanifla, through the great wisdom of Hashem, v'hatov amiti, and the true goodness. V'yivada b'sof kol ha'gilgulim ki hu yizbar shmo echad yachad miyuchad. We'll see at the end that the whole time really Hashem is one. V'husibib kol masibos ha'eleh b'darchem, and that was really Hashem guiding everything throughout the whole history. Lavo l'tachlis amiti, to come to its final conclusion. Shu hatov amiti shezacharnu, that is the true good that we mentioned. The Ramchal in Das Tfunos writes that when Mashiach comes, that's when the world will recognize that Hashem is one. It's going to be a history lesson. We're going to see why all the evil which existed and all the bad things that happened to the Jewish people, why it was really necessary in the grand plan to bring about a recognition of the oneness of Hashem. So I know we didn't actually talk about Shema itself yet, but this is all leading up to it. This is all about Yichud Hashem. When we say God is one, it just doesn't mean He's one. It's a very complicated, deep ideas here about how Hashem controls every aspect of the world and how the world has a purpose, and we're going to its final conclusion. And he's going to talk about how we think about if we think about these ideas when we say Shema, it makes saying Shema a much more meaningful and powerful experience. And with that, I will conclude. If anyone has any questions or comments.